Ladies, gentlemen, and exiles of all ages, 2 weeks ago, the folks over at Grinding Gear Games flew me and a bunch of other creators out for an event to once again get a chance to playtest the newest version of Path of Exile 2, as well as give us a pretty in-depth presentation that gives us a really sort of good view into why the game was delayed the most recent time, and also give us a really good picture of how the game will look at the start of the early access period, as well as a glimpse of what it should feel like when it's a fully finished and released product as well. The presentation that we were given was full of information about the endgame specifically, what to expect to be a part of this endgame at the start of early access specifically, as well as the activities that will be associated with that. And then of course they sent us out to play the game starting at level 1, so we didn't actually get to reach the endgame, but they gave us a real solid chunk of time, right around 7 hours or so of purely playing the game from level 1 upwards, which is the longest chunk that I've been able to get in the 3 events that I've done for the game now. I got to level 26 within this time, a pretty good amount of the way through Act 2 of the story, and I did so playing the new Mercenary class, which is just a wildly unique class within the game that I'll be happy to talk about my time with in a few minutes, but the first thing that we should talk about here is the endgame, as I know that you're all interested to hear about this. The start of the presentation given to us was essentially just talking about a recent shift in the mindset and mentality of creating the game for early access. Their original goal for early access was to have the story fully fleshed out and finished in the game, but as they kept developing, they realized more and more that it would be better both for the development of the game long term and for players' enjoyment as well if they sort of split off some of the resources being spent on the further sections of story and instead put a bunch of time into endgame mechanics instead, so that there would be an actual endgame to interact with once players reached it. To this end, in early access launch specifically, the story will only have Act 1 to 3, with plans for Act 4 to 6, which is the remaining story, to be added in within the early access period itself. This of course means a need for leveling as well, as this won't account for enough leveling to reach endgame proper without the second half of the story, so they've also added a difficulty mode called Cruel for the story, which lets you replay it at a higher difficulty for more relevant experience rewards, and so the expected track to endgame at the start of early access for Path of Exile 2 is to play through the first 3 acts of the campaign once, then play through them a second time on the higher difficulty versions, and this should put you right around the endgame in the vicinity of level 65, at least this is what we were told. When you get there, the endgame will actually be quite fleshed out considering the early access state the game will be launching in, and at early access launch specifically, there are planned to be 7 primary endgame grinds, essentially, depending on the rewards that you want and the activity that you want to actually do, and a lot of these will be familiar as essentially returning League mechanics from Path of Exile, the original game. First, there are of course maps themselves as a concept. This is just sort of how the game functions. You go from area to area, there's some randomness involved, some player control, and unlike maps from PoE 1, the maps in Path of Exile 2 don't actually always have a boss on them. Only about 40% of them have bosses now, and you know before you select one whether it does or does not. So this means that full AoE builds can actually thrive if you really want to build those, and most of the other endgame activities branch off of maps in one way or another. There are also Ascension Trials. The first of these is how you unlock your Ascendancy choice in Act 2, and this is essentially a sort of subclass that you can choose to specialize your focus a bit more for that character, giving you access to skill points that no other player can have unless they pick the exact same Ascendancy, and this is the only part of the skill trees in the game that is locked off from other players and other classes, as the main skill tree lets you go wherever you want really. The first Ascension Trial is very sort of roguelike in nature, one chamber at a time, 70 chamber options for the first floor of it, and there are 4 floors in total. It is RNG which actual chamber you get each time, and rather than health, you simply lose reward value each time you are hit, which is called Honor. This goes up to a limit, which will then end the activity, so it highly incentivizes no-hit runs specifically. The second Ascension Trial is meant to be super chaotic. You have to make choices that will both offer rewards and also make the rest of your run harder, and you will be offered certain rewards as you keep going in exchange for leaving the run. Essentially like you're being offered a deal, and you can either choose to accept it to end your run early, or keep pushing your luck into harder and harder rooms to try and get a better offer. But if you fail a room, your run will end instantly and you don't get any rewards. Then pretty much everything past that is all connected to the map system itself. First are breaches. These can be found in maps and activated to summon a load of demons. The faster that you kill the demons, the more will spawn, and the more duration the breach will last, once you keep going for longer rewards. Then there are expeditions, which are a fun, almost like Minesweeper-esque activity where you place bombs in between a bunch of coordinates that result in enemies spawning or modifiers being added, and you get choice within this activity to do things like avoid enemies that are resistant to your main damage type, which does add a bit of player agency, and sometimes you can even blow up like an entrance to a cave out of nowhere and get a whole like extra bonus level out of it as well. There are also rituals, which are a part of maps. These are circles that you will find at random with and interact in the middle, and these will resummon any enemy that has died within the circle's radius, and then if you can successfully kill them all, you'll get resources to spend on rewards dependent on how many things you resummoned and then kill. So basically, you drag as many monsters as you want want into the circle, kill them, then interact, and then kill them again, and that's the whole activity. Then there is also Delirium, which spreads a dangerous mist throughout the map that can either boost you or make enemies more dangerous, and importantly, every one of these different activities has its own unique kind of reward item or consumable that you can use to affect crafting in specific ways, and pretty much all of them have their own pinnacle boss associated with them too, which are extra hard bosses unique to each activity, and technically the Ascension Trials have multiple pinnacle level bosses associated with them too because of the RNG. As well, there is sort of an uber pinnacle boss that is above all of these in difficulty, but we weren't given further information past the fact that it exists, and it is probably the hardest thing in the entire game, at least at early access launch. Outside of this, we were told that there are 50 unique bosses that will be in the game in early access beginnings, with plans to have that number up to 100 by the full release, which is pretty great. And then they sent us off to play the game, which is where I got a number of hours on Mercenary under my belt. First off, on that front, Mercenary just feels wildly unique in an ARPG style of game. The vast majority of your actual skills simply load ammo into your crossbow, which you can then fire, and then of course have to reload. The different skills are split into different sort of categories like spread shots, which work like shotgun shots, automatic fire like an assault rifle, single shots like a sniper rifle, and things like grenade launcher shots as well, which are actually based on their own separate cooldown systems as opposed to the loading skills. But most skills simply reload your weapon with the type of ammo you select. But the fun thing is if you load up an ammo type, swapping between them is faster than a full reload. So in between packs, you walk around reloading 4 different types of skills if you want to, so that when you enter combat, you can like blast through all of your shotgun ammo, then without reloading, switch to your assault rifle shots, and then again without reloading, fire off a high-powered sniper round. The main playstyle that I ended up with as I progressed was a mix of the early rapid-fire skill, which stacks armor shred, and high-velocity bullet, the sniper rifle skill. This does a ton of bonus damage against an enemy with its armor fully shredded as a debuff. This created some fun dynamic gameplay options as well, as some enemies have really low base armor, which makes building the debuff up with the assault rifle shots really fast and makes them die super quick as a result. Whereas others are built to have hundreds and hundreds of armor, and then it became more efficient damage-wise to just spam high-velocity shot with some support gem choices like triple shot. The point being, even for something relatively early game, I got to like level 26 and I was enjoying my setup. There was still relevant use for grenades and for the shotgun shots, especially for larger group clearing, but I got a ton of enjoyment from just piercing shots and armor reduction with a playstyle that felt completely unique in this style of game, which is about the most positive thing that I can say for a genre that has existed for this long, honestly. I really enjoyed the class and my time with it, and with it being the furthest I've gotten into the game so far in these PoE early events. I really enjoyed all the new things that I experienced as well, with my favorite part by far still being the bosses, with some of them being a bit more straightforward and others having mechanics that you have to learn that aren't explained in obvious ways, which are sort of like puzzles to solve, and I love those kinds of mechanics as well. Overall, the game was fun. It felt smoother than the previous 2 times that I've played it. I got further in, and the quality only went up, if anything, from the early game that I've experienced from the last 2 times. And while it can be a bit complex at the start getting to grips with Path of Exile 2, they have put a lot of effort and time into making the new player experience more accessible than the first game. This, plus the effort to put in a good amount of endgame activities and content for early access launch, and I think the game is on a honestly pretty good track to success, really. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Just a roundup of my recent trip down to play Path of Exile 2 ahead of its upcoming early access release, what I learned, and what I got to do with the game myself. I hope you've enjoyed this, and feel free to ask any questions down in the comments below too, and we will answer what we can. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.